It's time to gather loved ones together for all the holidays' best spread. Lynn's has great prices on all your favorite Thanksgiving items, from delicious turkey with all the fixings to mashed potatoes and yummy pies. We have everything you need to create your perfect Thanksgiving dinner. Whether it's cooking the traditional meal, completely store-bought, or a combination of both, your best holiday meal starts here. Learn more and start shopping today at linnsgrocery.com. Lynn's, where delicious begins.
The views and opinions expressed by A Little Bit Culty are those of the hosts and don't reflect the official policy or position of the podcast, right, Sarah?
Correct.
Any of the, quote, fire content, I prefer lava content, provided by our guests, bloggers, sponsors, or authors are the opinion and are not intended to malign a religion, a group, a club, an organization, business individual, anyone or anything, unless, Sarah?
You're a douchebag.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Also, we're not doctors, psychologists, or wizards. We're just two non-experts trying to make you a friendly, informative podcast based on our experience that we've turned into wisdom. Okay?
Good talk.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. Sarah Edmondson here.
And I'm Anthony Ames, a.k.a. Nippy, Sarah's husband, and you're listening to
A Little Bit Culty,
a.k.a. ALBC, a podcast about what happens when devotion goes to the dark side.
We've been there and back again. A little about us. True story. We met and fell in love in a cult. And then we woke up and got the hell out of Dodge.
And the whole thing was captured in the HBO docuseries The Vow, now in its second season.
I also wrote about our experience in my memoir, Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life.
Look at us, a couple of married podcasters who just happen to have a weekly date night where we interview experts and advocates in things like cult awareness and mind control.
Wait. This does not count toward date night, babe. We got to schedule that. That's separate.
So it's 2 days we got to hang out?
We do this podcast thing because we learned a lot on our exit ramp out of NXIVM, still on that journey, and we want to pay the lessons forward with the help of other cult survivors and whistleblowers.
We know all too well that culty things happen. It happens to people every day across every walk of life. So join us each week to tackle these culty dynamics, everywhere from online dating to mega churches and multi-level marketing.
This stuff really is everywhere. The cultiverse just keeps on expanding, and so are we. Welcome to Season 5 of A Little Bit Culty, serving cult content and word salads weekly on your favorite podcast platforms. Learn more at alittlebitculty.com.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to it, my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Welcome to our podcast, A Little Bit Culty.
What voice is that?
Here's my co-host, Sarah Edmondson. Take it away, Sarah.
Why, thank you. What is it?
I'm just seeing what works. Our fans gave me feedback.
It's that
on
sweet honey voice going back in time.
I have a Tiger Woods impression that, like, from the 90s.
Let's
that
hear
I would do. And so, Tiger, how was it out there? So, well, my short game, it just wasn't going early, and that proved to be problematic later on. But fortunately, my putting game was spot on, and I was able to birdie the final 2 holes, and hopefully that'll work out, and I'll just come back tomorrow and just improve my short game.
I just tried to take a picture. I'm going to be doing this because it's not just the voice, it's the face. It's all the face.
It's all the face.
Nippy and I have had to laugh again because if you're listening to this podcast in order, you just listened to last week Daniel Barbin-Levin from the Sarah Lawrence cult of Larry Ray. And before that, Social Martin of La Luz del Mundo. And those are 2 survivors of some horrific, dark, painful, awful abuse. And I know that, like, for us, it affects us, and our listeners are like, please, oh God, that was sickening. And they're, I think we all just need a little break, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not totally over.
Yeah, to the point where I'm like, I don't know how long.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, Nippy, let's just take a little break from the survivor stuff, and we're going to talk to some experts. Today we speak to the director of Stolen Youth. Many of you have watched the documentary, which means you get a gold star and a stripe on your sash for being a good student, because it really will help you to enjoy this podcast if you've seen the series. But after this, we're going to have a whole series of experts and some journalists and definitely some lighter fare as we work our way into season 6.
Wow, season 6.
And no, we will not take a break. But yes,
We've had spring break.
we will take a break. We have stockpiled. Last week, we recorded 5 episodes. OMG. We were ballers.
And I went to Dallas and recorded 3 episodes for the new football podcast.
So if you're
Pretty
not
dope.
aware of that, we will be announcing something more official, a little tangential project for Nippy, and I'm very excited for him. So stay tuned for the official announce.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
our guest today, again, if you haven't listened, well, first of all, watch the docuseries and definitely listen to last week's episode with Daniel Barbin-Levin.
Did someone get mad at you for giving homework again?
Oh my God. So somebody was like, first of all, they were mad because wherever they were, they couldn't get the series. And I'm sorry about that. It may have been Australia or Canada. I apologize. I wish we could do more about that. Just maybe star the episode and come back to it once you have access to the series. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I just thought it was funny.
People get
Someone
mad
got
at us
pissed at you
for all
that.
sorts of things. Every episode, there's something that we did wrong. I had a great time on Amanda Montel's podcast, Sounds Like a Cult. And she was asking me what I do for my own spirituality now. And I'd say like I do a hodgepodge of different things. I don't follow any leader. I don't have a guru. I don't follow, capital F, follow anyone. But one of the things I mentioned is that before my bath, especially if I've done an interview, I light Palo Santo or sage. And I got accused of cultural appropriation. So,
wow.
can you appreciate?
I've seen you do that.
Here's
I've seen you
actually,
do
I
that,
don't, I'm
actually.
asking legitimately, can you appreciate a ritual from another culture or religion and not be appropriating? I don't know. I'm asking that seriously. Like, what are the rules? Please weigh in the comments below on this episode. Thank you very much. So our guest today, no tangent.
There was no segue, Sarah, there.
No, there's no segue.
There was no segue, Sarah, there.
No, it's just like, I'm lost.
Yeah,
I have no
okay.
answer. Cultural appropriation.
Carry on.
Well, actually, you know who did culturally appropriate a lot?
I don't know.
Larry Ray.
There you go.
Larry Ray.
Yeah, you even surprised
He
me.
for sure did. He took from
Yeah.
all sorts of places and claimed it as his own. And as a quick recap, we are covering the cult that surrounded the now infamous Larry Ray, a man who spent his 50s and 60s living with his college student daughter at Sarah Lawrence and unleashing all sorts of abuse on her friends. Daniel Levin was one of Ray's victims. That was our guest last week.
Beyond these 2 episodes, you can also learn more about the insane story by watching Hulu's Stolen Youth Inside the Cult of Sarah Lawrence, which is out now. That's homework that Sarah is assigning. Nippy was like, I don't know if we should be giving our audience homework, but
Don't make me the
that's-
bad cop.
I'm just sorry. That's how it happened.
For today's episode, we sat down with the director behind Stolen Youth, Zachary Heinzerling.
Heinzerling is an Academy Award nominated and Emmy-winning director currently based in New York City.
You've probably seen some of his pieces before, such as his work with Beyoncé on creating her 2015 5-part web series self-titled for her eponymous album.
He also worked on the critically acclaimed 6-part series McCartney 321, starring Sir Paul McCartney and Rick Rubin for Hulu.
Today, we get into the thick of Stolen Youth, trying to find a better understanding of how to make docuseries about content that we cover in A Little Bit Culty, how to be trauma-informed, how to deal with subjects who have gone through harrowing experiences, such as the brave victims in Stolen Youth. We also discuss with Zach how he was able to obtain all this footage and how he managed to produce this entire documentary of what went down within the cult. Without further ado, Zach Heinzerling. So welcome to A Little Bit Culty. How are you doing? Are you doing a lot of press right now?
We're doing some press, yeah. The series airs on Thursday, so, we're excited to get it out and show people what we've been working on.
How do you feel about it?
I feel good. Larry was just sentenced 2 weeks ago. This thing is coming out. I feel like for me and for a lot of people involved, it's sort of coming to an end. I think the sentencing for the survivors is hugely important. Just the knowledge that he'll be away for the rest of his life. And I think if this had come out in a year, they would still kind of have obligations with the documentary and stuff. So I think it's really nice that it's all just kind of happening at the same time.
Yeah, it is good.
And it's a relief for me. It's been a long, 3-year journey. So, as I'm sure the people making the series get very involved. Everyone is talking about really personal stuff. There's a lot to making a documentary about this kind of traumatic subject matter. So I think we're excited to introduce it to the public, and we feel really good about the series. We're giving birth to the baby, and that's exciting.
This is going to be a multi-part question. It'll let you riff for a little bit, but it's more of like, what attracted you to it? Did you have an idea of what you were looking at when it happened, as opposed to how you ended? Was your hypothesis matched? And what did you learn in the process of going into it thinking one thing, doing the project? What wisdom did you have by the time it was over?
Yeah, I think my approach in this series was kind of similar to all the documentaries I've worked on. You're interested in someone or something, you can relate to it, you find a little bit of yourself in it. In this instance, Daniel was the kind of starting point. He approached me about making a documentary. He was writing a book about his experience with Larry, and Daniel sort of wanted to protect the other victims by making something that, was done responsibly and not gratuitously. And, he sort of felt like I was someone who could develop a relationship with and gain a sense of trust enough to sort of put this story in my hands. I think for me, I kind of thought I was pretty similar to Daniel in a lot of ways. We're around the same age. I went to a liberal arts school and kind of had a lot of the same kind of friends, was interested in the same kind of things, was kind of artistically minded, didn't really know who I was. I was trying to define myself in college, diverse set of friends. And weirdly, we both have mothers who have diabetes and we weirdly have an older brother whose name is Josh, who his older brother, I think went to Harvard, and my older brother went to a prominent school. And we both sort of felt like we were the sort of younger brother trying to follow the footsteps of the older brother. Anyway, a lot of like strange coincidental, similarities, but more so I just felt like, this could have been me. I felt like reading the article, I did not feel that way. Reading the article, I felt this is almost like too insane to understand. His relationship with Gorbachev, he was maybe in the CIA, this idea that he had convinced individuals that they had poisoned him at the behest of Bernard Kerik and Rudy Giuliani, all of it just seemed like, and this is not at all to place judgment on the writing of the article. I think the article was very effective in gaining attention for this and ultimately led to Larry being convicted. But, you need a bigger page, you need a wider canvas to tell this kind of story, to really understand that, these are people like you and I. You can relate to this. You may think that it's very esoteric and rarefied territory. And when you think about the word cult, you immediately go to the kind of like 3 to 4 primary examples of cults in history that define what it means to be in a cult. And I think that's all like changing now. And I think Daniel really wanted this to not be like everything else out there, but wanted it to be a human story told from the perspectives of the survivors so that audiences could empathize with their story and see themselves in it. So I saw myself in it. And then as far as where the journey went, like all documentaries, I think you start from a place of interest and then you don't know where it's going to go. And that's part of the joy in it for me. I think I developed relationships with people I never would have met and followed them on journeys that I could never hope to understand by reading a book about it or an article, or having a conversation. But, you're really kind of living this experience with people. And because they're real people going through a real experience, that can go in any number of directions, So the idea that Felicia would want to see her family again, certainly was not in my mind when I met Felicia with Larry Ray back in 2020. She described herself as his wife. So the journey was beyond anything I could have imagined. And so, of course, that's what happens with the film or the series becomes, a reflection of that journey. So here we are. Didn't know where it was going to go when we started.
Good on Daniel for having those instincts and knowing to do that. That speaks volumes about him from my perspective, because I can speak for Sarah and most of us when we were kind of tail spinning. And the thought of going to a director who was sensitive enough to tell the story was the furthest thing from our
Well, that came
thoughts,
later.
wouldn't you say,
Yeah,
Sarah?
I mean, that came later.
We lucked into
Yeah.
that, fortunately. Yeah. But for Daniel to have the foresight and to understand that that's the lane his story would be in speaks volumes about Daniel, I think. Good for him.
Yeah, he said something to me in our first meeting. I made this film called Cutie and the Boxer about these two Japanese artists. And he said that what I liked about that film was that he imagined that when the subjects watched it, that they would see themselves in it in a new way and would be supportive of the project, but that they would learn something from watching their lives on screen. And he hoped that, because when we started, you have to imagine that, a lot of the people in it were still under the influence of Larry. So in his mind, he imagined that the documentary could be a way of people seeing themselves in a new light, gain a new perspective, and help in the process of, getting out of the kind of mental prison that they were in. So it's always kind of a blessing that documentary can serve multiple purposes. It can serve the purpose of entertaining and communicating to wide audiences, but can also serve a completely different purpose for the people involved.
For him to have that kind of sensitivity, because I know my instincts, and I'll speak for myself here, was like a little bit of frustration with the people that were still kind of in and wanting to hit it with a blunt object more than have the sensitivity and compassion to lead them through that. And it comes through.
He actually said something in his book about like wanting to go in there and rescue them and pull them out. But he knew that just because he did that didn't mean they wouldn't be out. And they had to, Nippy and I call it waking up. Like they had to wake up on their own terms. Has anybody like woken up or left Larry in their mind since the doc or since the filming, or that you know of?
Well, Alicia, obviously in the process of making the doc, I think it actually became more that kind of a chain reaction, in the process of making the film, starting with Felicia having an interest in finding her family. Conversations, I was in touch with her family members at the same time, but I think it really took Felicia like reaching out to them to really get them to like fully open up and talk about what had happened to them and regain their sense of self-worth. They had distanced themselves from Larry physically, but I think mentally we're still defending him. And I think, when Felicia sort of goes and in this, I was filming her when this happened, but goes through this process of like really, step by step trying to understand what happened to her and re-narrativizing her life for herself and really differentiating, Larry's version of her versus the real her, the self prior to Larry, re-engaging with people. It kind of had a chain reaction for her siblings as well. And then in the news, Isabella is about to be sentenced, and she has released court documents basically explaining that she now sees Larry as her abuser and is apologizing to the other victims, for the things that she did at the behest of Larry. So she's going through her own process. It's not a part of the documentary, although I will say that I felt, there were times where she was pushing in that direction, but her legal situation was a lot more difficult because, she ended up pleading guilty to a felony. We kind of had to stop our communication as a result of that. But I think we'll see, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Isabella. We'll find out actually in a few weeks. Her sentencing, I think, is at the end of February. But, I think she's going through her own process. And I don't know, I think everyone has their own path. And all of the survivors were in some form of therapy. And I think, they had to deal with the trial, which makes things more difficult. But also, I think their legal support was really good about providing them with outside therapists, outside to just having a lawyer. I introduced Felicia and Isabella to a nonprofit called Sanctuary for Families, which does help with legal services and counseling services for victims of domestic abuse, which I think a lot of cultic relationships have similarities to domestic violence. So anyway, they did have help. And as far as the documentary, and I think telling their story on their own terms helped them, in this process of really like redefining themselves and feeling like having ownership because their narratives have been stolen from them. So I don't know that that was the intention that Daniel had in mind, but I think it was a benefit of this process.
Well, he's coming from the right place. So I think whatever the emergent property is of that is going to reflect that. And I think them claiming their stories might be one of those things.
I mean, just logistically, I was so curious how did you get access to all of the recordings? Crazy similarity that both Larry Ray and Keith Raniere recorded everything, like the brilliant sociopaths that they are. But how did that become public domain or all the footage of the apartment? Where was that from, if you can say?
Yeah, well, there's a few places. I met Larry, it's not in the series, but I met him before he was indicted. And he started emailing me recordings, which, were to him, of course, proof of his innocence, but to anyone, outside of his delusion were the opposite of that. And then Felicia, she contributed with some videos and audio from her archive. But the main source of the archival was the trial. I think we didn't really we had audio, which was very effective, but so much of the video came out in the trial. And once it's used in the trial, then it becomes public record. There's a lot of video that thankfully was not made public. And at some point I want to have a conversation with the district attorney or the prosecutors about, how they determine what should and shouldn't be public, because a lot of the video immediately after the trial, went up on all these websites like Daily Mail, but it without context, that video, it's just so hard for these people to see.
That chapped my ass, by the way, as a survivor. That was like so unfathomable that was out there.
And they, released like full length. I mean, these like 20-minute videos of like
kids getting tortured.
Fuck. And kids torturing themselves because they were in such a state of manipulation that, this was the only thing that was like serving this sick, delusional narcissist. So I actually think that because that happened, there was more of an effort to just like understand, we spent the whole first hour basically just on what is memory manipulation and kind of slowly understanding how strategic and methodical and slow this process is, so that by the time you see those videos, you know exactly what's going on. And I mean, it's still shocking. It's still shocking, and it's still hard. Still really hard to explain. But yeah, that's where the video came from. We also did sort of creative interpretations of the apartment and kind of shot it in a way where it felt like, it was based on images of the apartment, but kind of felt almost like a hazy memory.
I thought that was really, really well done. And I also really appreciated the use of the journals and the drawing and the whiteboards and the visuals to go with it. I thought that was such a perfect blend of just bringing the observer through the process without being too sensational, which I'm sure was something that you were very aware of from the beginning.
Yeah, it's tough because I don't know, we've now established this genre in American media, documentary, cinema. It's super popular. Your North Star is the fact that these individuals have trusted you with their story. So yeah, I don't know. It's like the appetite. That's a whole other conversation.
This is the golden age of cult recovery. The more we speak up and share our stories, the more we realize we are not alone. Your voice and your story can empower others. This is Sarah, and I'm proud to be a founding collaborator of the #IGotOut movement. Learn more at igotout.org.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or never miss yoga. Maybe it's getting 8 hours of sleep. I mean, that's my personal and everyone's dream, isn't it? Well, I definitely have some non-negotiables. Like, I'm in Vancouver right now, and I'm spending literally as much time as I can outside in nature. Hashtag cold pools, hashtag crushing it. Nature is a non-negotiable. Not enough time in the fresh air and the trees around me, and I start to feel not great, not myself, not grounded. Therapy day is a bit like my nature walks. I try to not miss it, and I know I'm just going to feel so much better all around if I make it a priority. I get so much out of it. It helps me put my worries and anxieties in their rightful place and helps me clear my mind so I can focus on what I really need and sometimes what I don't need. Like, I don't need to be overbooking myself just because I hate to say no to people. You know what I mean? Thanks, therapy. Thanks for helping me see that. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Look, even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/culty today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/culty.
I think that's the responsibility of people like you, Zach, Daniel, us, and those things is, yes, there's this sensational kind of aspect to it, but if people can take the wisdom out of it and put it into sound bites and content so people can understand it, then I'm kind of willing to be sacrificed in your mind as at the altar of sensationalism. It's up to you to turn it into something positive, and it's up to the human team to come in, and someone with Daniel's sentiment and impulses to know to do that even when he's in trauma, to me is exactly what I think his lane is, and it's opened up to him. So hopefully we're adding to that.
Yeah, and I think his book is really beautiful. I think in a book also, it's a little bit easier for you to just purely be the author. You know, I think my role was a little bit more of like juggling a lot of interests. You know, you're making compromises. You know, this still has to be like digestible for lots of people. And you want it to be seen by a lot of people, but you also want it to have integrity. So I think that, yeah, it's a lot of like checks and balances, a lot of like, is this too much? Is this too little? Lots of people, you know, a real like group effort to get something as opposed to like my voice. But, you know, as far as like things like the animation and stuff, that's where my voice comes in, because I felt like that was the kind of, is like, how do you get people in the mindset of like what it was like to be when you're 18 or 19 and in this kind of progressive, artistically minded. So it felt like it needed to have a playfulness to it. Everything's so like serious, and like these are the like definitions of X, Y, and Z, and like expert focused. I feel like you lose the like, this is what it's like, you know, to be in the dorm. This is what it's like to see my friend. This is what it's like to like, you know, and all of those images were, you know, stuff that they had drawn in college. And some of it was more like inspired by, but the styling of those animations and, you know, what you see on the wall are the actual like drawings of the kids from college and stuff.
Zach, I don't know if you know this, our podcast has a segment, you know, we've had our own trauma, and part of our healing is laughter and levity in all the darkness. And so we have a segment called What Chaps Your Ass? And it's basically, what's the thing that bothers you the most? I'm going to tell you what chaps my ass about this situation, and then you can tell me yours. I mean, other than the obvious of the whole thing, but I just don't understand how this school let a grown-ass adult like sleep in the dorm. And they just like, it's so wildly inappropriate. And we know that people like Raven and Max, some of their peers, said things to authorities and nothing happened. Did that come out in any way? Did you try to get a statement from the university, or did they ignore you? Or can you give me some resolution there, please?
I think we're all still looking for a resolution, honestly. I think the most damning indictment of the school that I know of came actually from the New York Magazine reporters, which is that Claudia's parents, you know, contacted the school at least one time, if not more, to ask about Larry. And I think at this point, you know, she was living in the apartment on the Upper East Side. The period of time he was staying on campus was a semester. And, it would be some night, it would be like 4 or 5 nights some weeks, and other weeks it would be less. So I think from the school's perspective, at the time, it's like a parent crashing in their daughter's dorm room. I think in reality, we see exactly what happened, and it was much more sinister than they ever could have imagined. But as far as the school's response, we include this in our documentary at the end, a piece from their statement, which says, at the time, we had no reports of Larry living on campus. I imagine their legal team, crafted that. And it says at the time. So I don't know if that means like that semester that he was there and wasn't living, which, like, how do you define living? But subsequent reports say that he was, So I don't know. I think they're having a hard time, like, just coming clean with an admission that they messed up. And honestly, I think the film talks a little bit about the school, but I'm hoping that there's more that's done, and I'm hoping that there is some kind of, I don't know, lawsuit or something that makes them face this. I obviously know that they have a very different policy for dorms now than they did then, and they've had to deal with this, but I don't feel that they have come forth and really taken this on. And they declined, requests for interviews. They just kind of sent us a statement. I will say they did allow us to film on campus, some of the buildings and B-roll kind of shots. And Daniel was a big part of that, because I think they felt like Daniel's an alum. He'd written this book. He was trying to talk about it in a healthy way, and the school wanted to, support those efforts. They wouldn't grant us an interview, but they did allow us to film on campus. I think they didn't have to do that.
Right. It was the least they could do.
Yeah.
in my opinion.
It does beckon a lot of questions, because if you look at a lot of college campuses and kind of how dorm life is.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it and I'm like, this could have happened on my dorm.
Anywhere. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
And Sarah Lawrence, at the time, they encouraged students to have relationships with, like, different generations of people. And the idea that a dad would crash on the couch was not actually crazy to any of these kids.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And the same was probably true of the administration. I think the problem comes, like, later when he's not living on campus anymore, but do a thorough investigation of whatever is
for sure.
And find out, like, what's going on with Santos. The fact that Santos basically was put on leave and suspended for school because he had, this isn't something we go into the documentary, so I won't go, too far into it, but he was basically confessing to violent thoughts. And so the school put him on leave. This was, of course, because Larry was manipulating him. No one looked into it. The crazy thing about it is, like, how did it take 10 years for anyone to say anything about this person? And I think that's because, like Raven says, like, it was just too crazy. I don't know. It's like people just don't think that this can happen. People don't think that there are people like Larry out there.
That's the biggest thing that we've discovered in this is, like, when Sarah went to the FBI for her story, the FBI was kind of like shrugged their shoulders. And I think one of the things that allows these guys to get away with it is, to your point, it's so absurd and crazy that people just don't think they're susceptible to it. They don't think other people are going to be susceptible to it. They need an education themselves in what these things look like and sound like before it's 5-10 years too long.
Specifically coercive control.
Precursors. Yeah, there's precursors that at least people could say, that might be this. Let's kick the tires a little bit. And I think it's too late between they find out.
Yeah. I mean, there's a story, Isabella and Felicia are in the house in New Jersey where they were living in squalor. And this is 8 or 9 years after this started. And their parents stage an intervention where they come to the house and, try to rescue their daughters. This is after the article came out. And the cops come to the house, and the cops, and Larry's like, so-and-so, the Rosarios are drug dealers, and Isabella's mother is, like, abusive, sexually abused her. and yada, yada, yada. And the cops are like, okay. And I'm like, you're standing in this house where Larry, at this point, 60-year-old man, is living with two women in a house that doesn't have any furniture. Like, something is up here. And if that isn't like a red flag of like, we need to further investigate this, what is?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people we've interviewed who were almost saved, could have been saved by law enforcement, who didn't know what they
Yeah.
were looking at and didn't know what questions to ask, and clearly didn't know how to spot a traumatized victim who'd been brainwashed or indoctrinated or coercive controlled, whatever you want to call it, into saying, no, I'm happy here. Don't take me. There's very specific physical signs in someone's eyes, someone's demeanor and their body and how they even talk. I mean, I can see it now, but we've been educating ourselves for 5 years.
There's also a visceral component to it as well that you can kind of feel,
Also, if you could just talk to that person without
Yeah.
Larry next to them.
I have another logistical question, and this is a question that we got often with The Vow, even though we were subjects, not producers or directors. But was it a topic, or did you consider, or how did you end up deciding not to have experts sort of give their opinion of the unfoldings?
We did actually interview experts, and we just didn't end up using some of the material in the film. I always felt like when we cut out of what was this like very tight story told by like 4 or 5 people, that it just like sort of popped the balloon of like being in that mindset and like sustaining it. And it was something about like immediately like we're in this kind of more intellectual space. And I think we were trying to create more of a feeling of being continually boxed in and digging into a deeper and deeper hole. And like the feeling that you can't get, like a feeling that you can't get out of. So it wasn't necessarily a choice from the beginning. I think maybe my sensibility is that I'm more interested in a story that is just a little bit pure in the telling of it and the format. But, you know, we talked to Dan Shaw. We had a scene of these, I guess, the cult specialist, interventionalist in conversation with the parents about, you know, this is the type of way that you could speak to your loved one and not immediately be judgmental, meeting them where they are. I mean, there's so much to learn about this world. And so we did do a lot of that filming, but I guess in the end, it just,
I get it.
it's like you could make more.
Maybe it's a bonus.
Well, it's also a different documentary in a lot of ways.
We have a little bit of a smaller canvas.
Right. You had 2 episodes. That's not a lot of time.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot more that could be done.
Is that what you were given? Was that your parameters?
Originally, it was a film because it was just Daniel's story. And then with Felicia and Isabella and the other Rosarios, it's 3 parts. And the 3rd part is almost an hour and a half. So it's about 3.5 hours. But we kind of figured that out along the way. You know, you have to imagine, too, this started in 2020. So as the trial got delayed and things kind of delayed, you know, we did feel the need that we needed to sort of finish the project in somewhat of a timely manner. So that also dictated the length of the series, too.
So many complicated factors with documentaries about real people who are, and the legal stuff. Oh, it's so complicated.
Hey there, listener. Hope you're enjoying this episode and that you're taking deep breaths when we cover the enraging stuff that cult jerks are up to. Let it out, as in the yoga practice. Inhale positivity, exhale negativity. That's for you, Sarah. We got this. No hulking it out, all you little hulksters. And if you need some helpful resources on the topic of cult recovery, check out our website at alittlebitculty.com. And now, here's a brief message from our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or never miss yoga. Maybe it's getting 8 hours of sleep. I mean, that's my personal and everyone's dream, isn't it? Well, I definitely have some non-negotiables. Like, I'm in Vancouver right now, and I'm spending literally as much time as I can outside in nature. Hashtag cold pools, hashtag crushing it. Nature is a non-negotiable. Not enough time in the fresh air and the trees around me, and I start to feel not great, not myself, not grounded. Therapy day is a bit like my nature walks. I try to not miss it, and I know I'm just going to feel so much better all around if I make it a priority. I get so much out of it. It helps me put my worries and anxieties in their rightful place and helps me clear my mind so I can focus on what I really need and sometimes what I don't need. Like, I don't need to be overbooking myself just because I hate to say no to people. You know what I mean? Thanks, therapy. Thanks for helping me see that. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Look, even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/culty today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/culty.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
I'm just curious. Can you say who the cult interventionists were that you interviewed and didn't use? Pat Ryan?
Pat and Joe.
Pat and Joe,
Pat
yeah.
and Joe.
So we've had Pat on our podcast. We've had Dan on our podcast. We've had all the people.
I interviewed Rachel Bernstein too.
Yes, she's great.
I had a weekly meeting with her where she was instrumental in this process because she would basically kind of coach me on this would be a responsible reaction to this situation, or this is something that you could say that might garner a different response. And she's just like very like careful and sensitive throughout the process. So
She's great. That was actually one of our questions. Like for you, how did you self-educate, or how did also take care of yourself? Because we had, Nippy, I know you had a question based on what Kareem told you about.
So by the end of our shooting on our doc, The Vow, the producers, directors, and a lot of people that have worked on it, even some people had decided they didn't want to work on the second season, were so averse to people in that kind of trauma, particularly sexual trauma. And I think the subjects had gone through it in a longer period of time than yours, that many of them said, I'm not touching that subject matter again, because it was so hard to navigate, and there's so many people that you have to be sensitive to, and people are blaming each other. They're in this state of trauma. I don't know if that was similar to your experience, how you feel about it going forward.
are you talking about the producers?
Well, I'm
For
talking
you.
about as a director, producer, do you have similar feelings about that subject matter being in it for, would you say, 3 years?
Yeah.
Would you do it again?
Yeah. Yeah, not for a while. I don't know. I think, I don't know. It's hard to talk about it as if it's difficult as a director or producer, because it's so much more difficult for the subjects.
Of course, yeah.
It's difficult in different ways, but you do take on a lot of their trauma. Not that you take it away from them, you share it with them. And, just what an awful human. I don't know. A lot of the times I kept trying to figure out and this would be an interesting conversation, for you all, but the why of it. And with Larry, when he was indicted, he was living on an air mattress in a friend's house in New Jersey with junk everywhere and holes in the yard and no money to his name. His scheme was not one that was this pyramid scheme creating loads of wealth. He wasn't living a life of luxury. What was feeding him was perversion, that this sickness where anything he could do to make himself feel empowered, in control, empowered, but to an extent that it is beyond what you could imagine, expending so much energy, having hours-long interrogation sessions with individuals that is a form of torture, but you aren't getting anything actually in return other than just seeing them. It's like an evil. It's like an indescribable evil. And I think that honestly affected me the most. You can say, yes, it's he's a traumatic narcissist. He's like Raniere. He's like these other kind of cult figures. But I could list, there are things that are not included in the documentary that are worse, if you can imagine, worse than what you see in the documentary. And, I don't need to talk about them, but, so it became kind of like this supernatural evil. And I think that there's a lot of lessons because in lesser degrees of everything he does, you can see in other instances in everyday life. And I think there is stuff to learn, but, sometimes it just felt like that kind of evil where like, it's like a movie, but it's real life. And that affected me, I think, the most. And I think what you were talking about more is interpersonal relationships and just, morale amongst the team was hard to kind of, because, luckily, I think a lot of the people on the team had relationships with the subjects, and we were all very excited to see them like progressing and the Rosario family getting back together and like Dan with his book. And like there was a real sense of pride amongst the team that like we were doing something positive. But
yeah, I was gonna say,
it's hard to find positive in what is like a cesspool of Larry's like delusion.
Well, what you just described when you talk about that supernatural force that is oversimplified when you say, oh, he's just liking torture and stuff like that. There's something, I think, or more conversations to be had about the difficulty of projecting into that psychology and seeking to understand it. But not just that, how that psychology sometimes seems to thrive in our culture. And there's ecosystems that support it and don't know what it's looking at right away. And hopefully this is our thumbprint on bringing attention to that and words to it and wisdom to it. But everything you're saying about that, I felt I had a supernatural thing kind of get a grip of me.
And I'm sure Larry was traumatized. I'm sure there's like, the problem is we couldn't really figure out, we couldn't really verify Larry's childhood. There was no credible sources that would talk to us. So we didn't go down the path of understanding Larry. And I think for all of these individuals, that would be probably good for society to help us understand like how someone like that's created. But at the same time, a lot of the behavior is condoned in society. A lot of it is, we don't really necessarily see it as bad yet. And the fact that, he can do what he did for so long and only until he publishes a website of one of the women, like basically being abused, is he caught? That's more the question that's worthwhile to answer right now.
Just to clarify, that was Claudia being an escort?
Yeah. Well, the website that kind of broke the story was claudiadrury.com, and there was a video of her basically interrogated by Larry. And
right, that one.
In Larry's mind, she was confessing to poisoning, but people that saw the video were like, this isn't Claudia, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Before we go, like, in your experience, is the why of it like even important, or can it just be kind of whittled down to like the kind of a mental health issue, sickness, in this individual?
I can't answer that not being in context with my own story and in hearing somebody else's stories. But what I can say, and Sarah, I think would back me up on this, it's the same fucking playbook for all these guys. Every fucking time. It's just a different thing that they're doing a little bit differently.
Flavor.
But the psychology is, I'm going to hook them emotionally. I'm going to abuse them emotionally. There's no real symptom of that yet.
After love bombing.
Yeah. They provide value.
They get you.
And then, but the overall objective is that, and how they do it is pretty much the same. And I think everyone at any point in their life is going to have a moment where someone can get their meat hooks in you, not entirely, but they're susceptible in different ways. And I think just seeing that over and over and over and over again, and just letting that knowledge spill out into the world is the best we can do with just what's in front of us. And me giving you a platform and vice versa and all that stuff, I think helps it.
It feels though like people are always asking me like, why did he do it? And like the audiences feel the need to know, was it for money? It makes sense in people's minds if it's for money and for sex. It doesn't make sense in people's minds if it's for power. Some more esoteric like power, and it's a psychological disorder.
It is. Dan Shaw actually helped us with that a lot, to understand that type of traumatized narcissist.
I read his book.
Yeah. And that really makes sense to me. And my mom's, my parents are in that field. Like if you understand the attachment theory and like what happens as a little kid if your parents don't love you or you don't feel loved or whatever. And then what you do to fix that. And almost all of the people we've studied, from Koresh to
Have
Raniere,
that.
yeah, they have some traumatic childhood and they couldn't ever reconcile it. And I'm not a psychologist, but it usually goes there somewhere.
Well, I think also people might be asking those questions because on one level, they want to validate that they're not susceptible to it. So if there's an easy, simplistic answer as to why that exists, they can say themselves, and it's difficult to get people past the point of, I'm not that stupid to fall for that. And in a lot of ways, that sets up your susceptibility in a way.
Yeah. People also just want it to be some magician with spells. Like, he is also grounding who that person is so that we can understand that people like this can exist, even if they're among us. They're not necessarily get to the level of Keith or Larry, but, this can be, someone could have this kind of self-worth issue that metastasizes into an abusive, like power hungry,
Yep. And
traumatist.
And also on top of that, most of the organizations, at least that we've looked at, where it's not such a like direct one-on-one, smaller group, is that the narcissist or the sociopath or whatever pulling the strings is on the top, and the people around them don't look like that. They don't look as obvious as what you may see in somebody like Larry Ray or Keith Raniere, and people going, "Oh, I would never fall for that. Like, he's obviously a con man or a douchebag or whatever." Those guys are often not on the battleground. They're behind the scenes. So the more we educate, the more we make movies like this and inform and educate and get to the human story underneath it all, I think the more people will avoid these things. And I want to pass on a message too. We have a whole slew of resources, documentaries, podcasts, books, people like Dan, Yanya Lalich, Pat, and Joe at thelittlebitculty.com/resources. Please pass that on to anyone who's still in recovery. We're not therapists, but we like to connect people to the right resources. And I feel like that's a real missing resource in this space is, people coming out and telling their story now en masse, which is great. But like, I worry for them. I worry for their well-being. So please share that. And I'll make sure to put this one on the list as well, to add to the growing list of cult documentaries to warn people.
Great. Okay, great. I will. Thank you.
And a big hug too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for telling the story.
Thank you all.
That was great.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fans of your show and really feel like it's done so much good for this topic. And I know Kareem and Jahan really admire their work. So it's great to feel like we're continuing the torch.
Yes. Hopefully the torch will not have to be passed on one day.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thanks, Zach.
Take care.
So, Nip, what'd you think?
I think it's a tough job to do a documentary like that and not walk away kind of with a sense of some dark forces out there and also be on the other end of other people's trauma. It's hard.
Yeah, and actually, we didn't talk about it in this, but I heard it in another interview that Zach actually spent time with Larry and had footage of that. So I wish I'd asked him at the time why he didn't include that, and also why he didn't talk more about Larry's daughter, Talia, and her stance. But I think after piecing it all together that they wanted, or at least Daniel was aware of the fact that Talia was still in and wanted to leave her out so that maybe she would watch it and wake up.
And he had 3 episodes. So
Right.
you gotta leave a lot of it. It's akin to like why Mexico City was left on the
Cutting room floor for season 2 of The Vow. Yeah.
I think so.
Well, I would love to hear what you all thought. Please message us on Instagram. Leave us a voicemail over on SpeakPipe. If you're following us on Patreon, we are back doing the weekly lives. Last week, we did a Zoom call so we could all see each other with Sochil Martin and Yara Wild, who will be doing an episode with her soon to hear her story. Yeah, we'll hear Yara Wild's story. Last week, we also will have had Daniel Levin on a Q&A on Zoom and Patreon, so please follow us over there. And actually, this week, we will not be doing a live Patreon because Sarah is going to be in Portland. Why am I speaking of myself in the third person? I don't know.
Skill set.
We'll be back with live Patreon soon. Again, Stolen Youth is now on Hulu. Larry Ray is in prison for 60 years.
Thanks, everybody.
And have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave. But I know
Hope you liked this episode. Let's keep the conversation going and come hang out with us on Patreon, where we keep the tape rolling each week with special episodes just for Patreon subscribers and where we get deep into the weeds of unpacking every episode of The Vow.
And if you're looking for our show notes or some sweet, sweet swag or official ALBC podcast merch or a list of our most recommended cult recovery resources, visit our website at alittlebitculty.com.
And for more background on what brought us here, check out Sarah's page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, narrated by my wife, and at most bookstores.
A Little Bit Culty is a Talkhouse podcast and a Trace 120 production. We're executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, with writing, research, and additional production support by senior producer Jess Tardy. We're edited, mixed, and mastered by our rocking producer Will Rutherford of Citizens of Sound, and our amazing theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant and co-written by Nigel Asselin. Thank you for listening.
So have you
Exactly.
ever done a show in PVC?
Yeah, man. I did a tour in PVC and I regret it a little bit. I do, man. I regret it a little bit because I was just like, it wasn't very flattering on the top and then my knob was showing the whole time.
Moving right along.
Anyway, moving along.
Mum's like, I don't want to talk about your knob.
I don't want to talk about your
Not right now.
Not right now. I'll do it after the cameras are off.
So
Yes,
go
you
on.
Billboard chart-topping singer and songwriter Youngblood joins the Osbournes podcast. Listen now wherever you get podcasts.